You were sold a rinse, 10 days, 8 weeks, 20 minutes twice a day. Detox the mind, same word as juice bars and influencer saunas, same promise, impurities out, radiance in. The room is quiet, the air smells gentle, the copy speaks of release. What it does not say is who absorbs what you drop. A detox is never metaphysical. It is logistical. Something leaves you and lands somewhere. In the spiritual market, the somewhere is usually other people, partners who receive your new intolerance for conflict dressed as clarity, colleagues who carry your jobs while you recalibrate, communities that learn to hush their grievances because the hall has canonized hush as medicine. Stillness, when missold as detox, becomes a waste management theology. Your agitation is exported as someone else's chore. Stay, and I will not give you hygiene, I will give you forensics. We will examine the metaphors that launder harm, toxins, purification, detox, energetic residues, and watch them drift from physiology to ethics, from ethics to politics, until speech itself is treated as pollution. We will trace how silence becomes a solvent that dissolves nouns. Abuser becomes teacher with shadows. Exploitation becomes intensity. Grievance becomes attachment. Exit becomes aversion. I will lay out the economy of hush, how rooms that advertise serenity are engineered to prefer harmlessness of optics over non-harm, in fact, how the soft lamp and the woven throw and the sandalwood playlist function not as luxuries but as a conceptual filter that deletes anything with edges. Meditation is not the villain. The villain is purity rhetoric that recruits meditation into a sanitation regime. Under that regime, discomfort is sorted into two bins, noble and ignoble. Noble discomfort is the silent kind that flatters the brand. Knees ache, back burns, breath tightens. Ignoble discomfort is the speaking kind that names a cause. He touched me, they stole, the board lied. The first is canonized as detox, the second is shamed as bringing negativity into the space. Thus, the detox lie. That stillness by itself has a moral direction. Stillness is a scalpel. It cuts whatever hand wields it. In hands that fear conflict, it cuts the tongue. You will hear a sentence tonight that will not please donors or sentimentalists. Quiet is a political technology. It distributes who gets to define calm, who gets to interrupt it, who gets paid to enforce it, and who is punished for breaking it. A hall that calls itself sacred but cannot survive nouns has built not a sanctuary but an anesthetic. I will show you how etiquette in such rooms becomes metaphysics. The rules of not disturbing become truths about reality. All sounds arise and pass away becomes license to ignore which sounds are alarms. Thoughts are clouds becomes license to treat testimony as weather. In the end, everyone floats. Nobody lands. The wounded learn to bleed into rugs. What do you gain for watching this demolition? Not technique, not catharsis, a calibration. You will leave with ears that hear the difference between stillness as courage and stillness as camouflage. You will recognize detox as a marketing word for purity, and purity as a historic temptation that turns ethics into cosmetics. You will taste when your breath work is metabolizing rage without erasing its object, and when it is deleting the object so you can stay employable in a room that mistakes serenity for virtue. I will leave you with a line that does not heal but remembers, Calm that cannot name causes is complicity with a spa menu. Detox sounds medical, ancient, priestly. In scripture, impurities were kilesa, greed, hatred, delusion, sticky habits of grasping. In the wellness feed, impurities are energy, residue, vibes. The first is about attachment to a self. The second is about contamination of a space. Shift the grammar and you shift the target. If the problem is your clinging, the cut is existential and humiliating. It will touch your favorite virtues and your favorite wounds. If the problem is a contaminant, the cut is hygienic and flattering. Remove the irritant and keep the person. The person, of course, is you. Purity language is addictive because it offers won battles with no enemies. Release what no longer serves. The sentence does not fail because it is false. It fails because it lacks directionality. Release what into where. Release whose burden onto whom. In religious history, purity rites were always transfer rituals. Something unclean moved to a scapegoat, a river, a desert, a slave. Contemporary spiritual detox preserves the reassurance while disguising the transfer. The scapegoat is renamed negativity, the river is renamed breath, the slave is renamed emotional labor of others. There is an even subtler grammar. In detox rooms, noun aversion masquerades as wisdom. You are urged to speak in gerunds and weather reports. There is angering, there is tightening, a story is arising. This can be medicinal when used to unhook a clenched identity. It becomes ideological when it systematically avoids proper nouns. Proper nouns are how reality keeps receipts, names of people, dates, contracts, bylaws. Without them, every harm melts into mist, every cause into conditioning, every assault into trauma energy. You are left with immaculate sentences and a dirty world. Language becomes metaphysics by repetition. 1,000 disclaimers about just an experience create an ontology where nothing can be accused. That suits an economy whose products require perennial return. If the cause is never located, the cure is never complete. Detox is not a path, but a subscription. Your serenity is always almost here. Your payments are always on time. In this cosmology, truth is what reduces arousal fastest, and ethics is what reduces churn least. The market smiles because churn is revenue. The monastery smiles because churn looks like devotion. In classical asceticism, purity was bought with cost, fasting, alms, celibacy. In mindfulness modernity, purity is bought with tone, lowered voice, slow enunciation, phrases that cannot be falsified. Costless purity is the perfect theology for institutions that cannot afford scandal. It produces believers who can sit through any atrocity provided the soundtrack matches the app. It produces leaders who curate reality until reality dies politely. Detox, then, is not a cure for anger. It is a cure for dissent. It treats nameable harm as an impurity of speech and unnameable harm as an achievement of silence. The room becomes holy by eliminating the category of the profane. But a holiness allergic to profanity is just hygiene, and hygiene without truth is the precondition for disease. Silence is not neutral. It has a supply chain. In retreat economies, quiet is stacked, scheduled, branded, noble, deep, digital, restorative. Each label targets a demographic willing to pay for metabolized noise. Behind the labels sit logistics, policies that preempt grievance under the rubric of protecting container, choreographies that channel agitation into private interviews rather than public reckoning, protocols that anesthetize the room so that the room can be sold again next season as safe. Safety here means predictability. Nothing unprogrammed will break the arc of the weekend. If something breaks, it is retrofitted as teaching with a slide deck about surrender. The factory's assembly line begins with intake forms that collect confession while waiving recourse, continues with opening talks that prime for universalism, we all struggle, proceeds through practices that individualize distress, watch the sensation, not the story, ends with closings that privatize resolution, take what serves, leave the rest. Somewhere between the incense and the survey link, the public has been emptied from the person. The doctrine fits perfectly into the chassis of consumer attention. Attention is trained to return to itself, not to the world that needs naming. A trademark of the Quiet Factory is tone discipline. Staff are trained, formally or by osmosis, to respond to heat with velvet. Anger is met with the unblinking gaze of benevolence. Accusation with phrases about different truths. The performance is often sincere. Sincerity is not the issue. The issue is tempo. By slowing every exchange to the pace of breath counts, you deprive urgency of its necessary speed. Fire becomes candle. Candles are photogenic and do not set off sprinklers. Boards love factories that make quiet because quiet minimizes risk. Donors love them because quiet flatters their desire to be close to profundity without being close to accountability. Media love them because quiet photographs well. The factory, in return, loves what loves it. Its curriculum hardens around silence as the sacrament, outcompeting other sacraments like confession, witness, or naming. In time, any practice that produces speech looks crude. Any practice that produces absence looks refined. The room has acquired a palate. Its taste prefers elegant repression to unattractive truth. This is how harm learns to sleep, not through conspiracy, but through cuisine, a house style that seasons everything into mildness and calls heat unskillful. The factory teaches students to metabolize their alarms as personal weather, then evaluates teachers by their ability to maintain climate control. When storms become data points, the village downstream floods. No siren sounds because sirens are disruptive. Silence, to be sacred, must risk sound. A quiet that cannot tolerate nouns, alarms, or names is not sacred. It is merely a product with excellent UX. Institutions that sell this product will, over time, train a generation to confuse serenity with professionalism, equanimity with brand safety, awakening with a successful offsite. The soul of a tradition is traded for net promoter score. When detox becomes worldview, the site of repair migrates inward by decree. Work with your reactivity, sit with what arises, return to the sensation. These lines can be medicine. They also script a jurisdictional coup. Harms acquire passports stamped internal. The accused, an institution, a leader, a peer, disappears into the fog of your triggers. The accuser becomes a case study in projection. The room's serenity is preserved. The world remains altered only in the person least able to alter it. In this privatized cosmos, time becomes theology. Immediate regulation, pulse down, breath slow, wins status over slow justice. A body that calms quickly is called advanced. A body that shakes until truth lands is called attached. Regulation is good. Hierarchy built from regulation speed is class system by vagus nerve. It rewards the well-resourced, the well-slept, the well-insured, the already safe, then calls their smoothness insight. Those who live near sirens, courts, and bills learn that their biology disqualifies their testimony. The detox lie also canonizes amnesia. The instruction to return to the present is recited as if present were neutral ground. But the present is built from contracts and corpses. To bracket history for breath is technique. To erase history for tone is ideology. Under the ideology, every demand for context is framed as a dodge. Stay with what is, says the leader, whose institution wrote the bylaws that guarantee what is remains beneficial to them. Look too at how apology is metabolized. In detox rooms, apology often becomes a ritual of tone rather than a transfer of risk. I'm sorry you felt is spoken with exquisite softness. The harm's cost remains with the harmed. Metaphysically, the room believes in consequence without assignment. Karma arrives, but karma writes no names. That theology is convenient for the powerful and unendurable for the precise. Privatization of cause is not a harmless error. It is an assault on the causal clarity Dharma once championed. Dependent arising is not things just happen. It is an instruction to follow conditions until the lever is found. Detox collapses the search into self-care and sells you scented candles for the lever it refuses to let you name. You become a well-managed weather system in a house whose foundation still cracks the neighbor's wall. What does philosophy owe the world? Names, not vibes. Vibes stabilize. Names change law. If your spirituality stops at stabilization, you have purchased anesthesia and called it emptiness. The real thing names what anesthesia prevented you from surviving to name. Modern singers have lawyers. That is not a scandal, it is adulthood. The scandal is when risk management becomes metaphysics by being mislabeled as wisdom. Non-disparagement clauses are framed as right speech, reputational triage as skillful means, secrecy as protecting the container, curated statements as non-dual truth beyond sides. The detox lie thickens here. Harm is not denied. It is rendered unsayable except in formats controlled by those who most fear its fallout. Silence graduates from sacrament to policy. Notice how the rhetoric of healing gates critique. We need to heal as a community arrives just before accountability would. We're not ready for details, arrives just after lawyers are. The room is bathed in candles while time is weaponized. Delay the nouns until witnesses scatter, statutes expire, memories can be challenged as stories. The aesthetics of anesthesia return to bless the lapse. The harmed are invited to share their feelings, never their documentation. Meanwhile, doctrine adjusts to fit the perimeter fence. Teachings on non-self are emphasized to deauthorize the moral subject who could accuse. Teachings on impermanence are invoked to suggest that any enduring grievance is a failure to practice. Teachings on compassion are distilled into emotive displays that replace remediation. The thing once called Dharma, cutting delusion at the joint, becomes conflict avoidance with gongs. The NDA is only the loudest token of a quieter contract. Stability over truth. Stability is purchasable, truth is not. Institutions that live on renewals will always be tempted to buy the former and rent the latter. They will mint parables about staying in the middle way that mysteriously map onto the median donor's comfort. They will confuse the absence of headlines with the presence of health. They will train students to feel virtuous for never making a scene. Philosophy must reassert a crude premise. Reality contains scenes. To forbid scenes is to forbid portions of reality. A teaching that cannot be shouted sometimes is not a teaching, it is PR. The non-dual does not mean non-confrontational. The absolute is not allergic to indictment. If your shrine cannot house an indictment, it is not a shrine. It is lobby decor for a quiet factory. The detox lie thrives on a profound confusion. It mistakes emptiness for cleanliness. Cleanliness is the subtraction of dirt. Emptiness is the subtraction of essence. Cleanliness seeks polish. Emptiness seeks precision. Nothing stands alone. Everything arrives by conditions. Names are conventional and therefore adjustable, but until adjusted, they bind. An ontology worthy of the name will let you alter the map after you have located the cliff. Detox ontology redraws the map to include no cliffs and calls that freedom. Equanimity, in this confusion, becomes anesthesia. Equanimity actually means intimacy without purchase, to be with the burn without selling the stove or denying the cook. Anesthetics flatten, equanimity differentiates. It tells you with scandalous clarity that this pain is mine to name and yours to answer if you caused it. The detox lie melts that reciprocity into a warm bath in which everyone shares everything and nobody owes anything. The bath feels egalitarian. It is actually feudal. Power remains with those who can afford to be endlessly serene. Buddhism's hardest gift is causality without comfort. The wheel turns regardless of your preferences. Therefore, speak where speech turns a gear. The lie replaces causality with atmosphere. Atmosphere soothes, gears grind. The house that worships atmosphere will build altars to ventilation and call mechanics violence. In such a house, everyone breathes beautifully while the machine that cuts them keeps humming out of frame. Detox also borrows non-dual talk to sand off moral predicates. Beyond good and evil is advertised as the adult room. In that room, only feelings remain, not faults. But the non-dual does not abolish fault. It abolishes narcissism about fault, yours and theirs. It lets you say wrong without becoming righteous and mine without becoming martyr. A non-dual that cannot pronounce wrong is not non-dual. It is neutrality taxidermy. Philosophy is not therapy, yet it heals by accuracy. Accuracy requires the liberty to specify. Detox forbids specification and calls the prohibition subtlety. Subtlety without specification is evasion. To end evasion, we must endure the scandal of nouns. The scandal is holy. It ends the trance. It restores gravity to words like no self and compassion, which otherwise float like hotel art. I am not here to redeem loudness. I am here to puncture a costume. Stillness sold as detergent. The costume flatters donors, protects leaders, soothes attendees, and leaves the harmed speaking to carpets. It trains a generation to take their alarms to private breath and their receipts to the trash. It publishes gongs where it should publish minutes. It calls anesthesia equanimity, NDAs, right speech, curated peace, awakening. It is a civilization of plush hush built over a trench of swallowed nouns. If you have lived in such rooms, you know the look: eyes glazed with goodness, air shaped like apology, hands folded where fists should be. You also know the aftertaste, a cleanliness that feels like forgetting. What survives this demolition should not be surprising. Meditation without myth of detox, silence without ban on nouns, equanimity that can escort an indictment into the shrine and sit down beside it without dying of panic. A tradition that lets stillness keep its rightful job, making perception crisp enough to aim, will not fear voices. It will cultivate ears that can hear the difference between disruption and disclosure, between gossip and testimony, between a tantrum and a bell. I promised provocation. Here is the knife without sheath. If your stillness shields the hand that harms, it is not sacred, it is complicity. I'm silent flame. Break the hush, or stop calling it healing. Carry that sentence into the rooms that monetize your quiet. Watch which saints flinch. Watch which administrators panic. Watch which students laugh with relief because the trance finally cracked. Then name what could not be named. Not to detox, but to end a lie that turned a scalpel into a curtain. If silence is precious, it can bear a name. If it cannot, it is paper.